The crystal chandelier cast diamonds of light across the Continental Hotel's marble floor as 12-year-old Amelia Washington pushed through the golden doors, her torn sneakers squeaking against pristine tile. "Can I play for food?" she asked the room full of millionaires, her voice cutting through their champagne laughter. They didn't know she was about to expose every single one of them. They didn't know the homeless girl they were mocking was a piano prodigy who would bring their entire world crashing down. My friends, what happened next changed everything. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and please comment your city below. I want to see how far this tale of courage travels. The November rain hammered against the Continental Hotel's towering windows like desperate fingers tapping for entry. Inside, warmth radiated from every corner, from the golden sconces along burgundy walls to the laughter bubbling up from crystal champagne flutes. The annual Sterling Foundation Gala for Arts Education was in full swing, a gathering where New York's elite congratulated themselves on their generosity while wearing jewelry worth more than most people's homes. Amelia Washington stood outside those gilded doors, watching through the glass as servers in crisp white uniforms glided between guests carrying silver trays. Her stomach clenched, not just from hunger, though she hadn't eaten since yesterday's soup kitchen lunch, but from the weight of what she was about to do. The security guard had stepped away, probably for a smoke break. This was her chance. She pulled her grandmother's worn music theory book closer to her chest, feeling its familiar weight through her backpack. 3 months. That's how long it had been since Grandma Betty died, since the bank took their small apartment, since everything fell apart. 3 months of shelters of cold nights of trying to keep her fingers nimble enough to play whenever she found a piano in a church or community center. "You have a gift, baby girl," Grandma Betty used to say, her weathered hands guiding Amelia's small fingers across the keys. Music isn't just notes on a page. It's truth. And truth always finds a way to be heard. Amelia pushed through the door. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the mingled scents of expensive perfume and gourmet food. Her worn jacket, still damp from the rain, suddenly felt heavier. Water dripped from her stringy hair onto the marble floor, creating tiny puddles that reflected the chandelier light above. She took 3 steps forward before the conversations began to die, spreading outward from her presence like ripples in a pond. "Excuse me?" A sharp voice cut through the growing silence. Victoria Sterling materialized from the crowd like a predator sensing prey. Everything about her was sharp, her cheekbones, her designer dresses' angles, the click of her heels against marble, and especially her eyes as they swept over Amelia with undisguised disgust. "This is a private event. How did you get in here?" Amelia lifted her chin, fighting the urge to shrink back. "The door was open. I need to ask something." The door was... Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Security, where is security?" "Please," Amelia said quickly, her voice stronger now. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to know if I could play the piano." She gestured toward the grand Steinway that dominated the far corner of the ballroom, its black surface gleaming like still water. "In exchange for some food. Just one song." The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone laughed, a harsh, brittle sound that sparked others to join in. The laughter spread through the crowd like wildfire, growing louder, more mocking. Did this child just ask to perform at the Sterling Gala? A woman in pearls pressed her hand to her chest in exaggerated shock. "For food, Margaret. She wants to play for food." Her companion shook his head, his expression caught between amusement and disgust. "Like we're running some sort of street corner operation." Victoria's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Little girl, do you have any idea where you are?" This is the Sterling Foundation Gala. The musicians who perform here are world-renowned artists. They've trained at Juilliard, performed at Carnegie Hall. They don't play for food, they play for audiences who can appreciate true artistry. I can play, Amelia said simply. I'm very good. More laughter. Someone pulled out their phone, starting to record. Others followed suit, the small lights creating a constellation of mockery around her. "Oh, this is precious," Victoria said, playing to her audience now. "Tell me, where did you train? Under a bridge in the subway?" "My grandmother taught me," Amelia replied, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "Betty Washington. She played with the Philharmonic for 15 years. Victoria's expression flickered for just a moment, something Amelia couldn't quite read before the mask of disdain returned. Betty Washington, never heard of her. And even if that fairy tale were true, talent isn't genetic, dear. It requires proper training, discipline, culture, things that clearly— She gestured at Amelia's appearance. "You lack." From somewhere in the crowd, a man cleared his throat. "Victoria, perhaps we should just—" "No, Robert." Victoria cut him off without looking away from Amelia. "No, I think this is a teaching moment. You see, we're here raising money for arts education precisely to prevent situations like this, children with delusions of grandeur who think they can simply walk in off the street and demand attention." She turned to address the crowd, her voice carrying the practiced modulation of someone used to holding court. "But I'm nothing if not charitable. After all, isn't that why we're all here?" She paused for the appreciative chuckles. "So I'll make you a deal, little girl. You can play your one song. But there are conditions." Amelia's hands clenched at her sides. "What conditions?" "First, you'll play Für Elise. I assume even street musicians know that one. Second, you'll play it perfectly. Not a single missed note, not a single error in timing. And third," Victoria's smile widened, "when you fail, and you will fail, you'll leave immediately and never come back. You'll understand that there are places where you belong and places where you don't." "Agreed." The crowd pressed closer, hungry for the spectacle. Amelia could feel their eyes on her, could hear their whispered predictions of her humiliation. Part of her wanted to run, to escape back into the rain, where at least the judgment was impersonal. But then she thought of Grandma Betty, of all those hours at their old upright piano, of the music that lived in her bones. "And if I play it perfectly?" Amelia asked. Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Then you can eat your fill from the buffet. Though I should warn you, the caviar might be too rich for your constitution." "Victoria, this is unnecessary." The man called Robert spoke again, stepping forward from the crowd. Amelia noticed his kind eyes, the way he looked at her with curiosity rather than contempt. He was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and hands that moved with a musician's grace. "The child is clearly hungry. Let's just—" "Oh, come now, Dr. Chun," Victoria interrupted. "You of all people should appreciate this. Aren't you always saying that music is the great equalizer, that true talent shines through regardless of circumstance? Well, here's a chance to test that theory." Dr. Robert Chun. Amelia knew that name. He was one of the most celebrated pianists in the world, had played with every major symphony. He was looking at her now with an expression she couldn't quite read, concern mixed with something else. "Interest may be fine," Amelia said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I accept your conditions." The crowd parted as she walked toward the piano, their whispers following her like a tide. She could hear fragments of their conversations. This is cruel, even for Victoria. The poor thing probably can't even read music. Someone should stop this. Are you kidding? This is the most interesting thing that's happened at one of these galas in years. $10 says she runs out crying before finishing the first verse. 20 says she can't even find middle C. Amelia reached the piano bench and set down her backpack carefully. The Steinway was magnificent, its surface so polished, she could see her reflection. Thin face, hollow cheeks, eyes that looked too old for her 12 years. She ran her fingers along the fallboard before lifting it, revealing keys that gleamed like teeth. "Any time now," Victoria called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We do have a schedule to keep." Amelia sat down, adjusting the bench height, with practiced movements that made Dr. Chun step forward slightly. She placed her hands on her lap, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. In her mind, she wasn't in this hostile ballroom anymore. She was back in their small apartment, Grandma Betty beside her, the afternoon sun streaming through windows that needed washing. "Music isn't about impressing people, baby girl," Grandma Betty's voice echoed in her memory. "It's about truth. When you play, you tell your truth. And if you tell it honestly enough, beautifully enough, even the hardest hearts have to listen." Amelia opened her eyes and placed her fingers on the keys. The first note of Für Elise rang out pure and clear, silencing the last of the whispers. The acoustic of the ballroom was perfect, carrying the note up to the vaulted ceiling, where it seemed to hang like a prayer. She began to play. The familiar melody flowed from her fingers, but it was more than just notes in the right order. Each phrase was shaped with intention, each dynamic shift carefully controlled. Her left hand provided a foundation as steady as bedrock, while her right hand made the melody sing with a maturity that should have been impossible for someone her age. The laughter died completely. The smirks faded. Phones that had been raised to record her humiliation stayed up, but for a different reason now. Amelia played as if her life depended on it, because in a way it did. This wasn't just about food or proving Victoria wrong. This was about honoring everything Grandma Betty had taught her, about showing that beauty and skill could come from anywhere, even from a homeless girl in torn sneakers. As she moved into the more challenging passages, her fingers flew across the keys with precision that spoke of countless hours of practice. But it wasn't mechanical. Every note was infused with emotion, with the story of who she was and where she came from. The music filled the ballroom, transforming it from a place of mockery into something approaching a concert hall. Dr. Chun moved closer, his eyes wide with recognition. This wasn't just competent playing, this was artistry. The way she voiced the chords, the subtle rubato she employed, the perfect balance between technical precision and emotional expression, these were things that couldn't be taught. They had to be felt, understood at a level deeper than conscious thought. "My God," someone whispered. "She's actually good." "Good," another voice responded. "She's extraordinary." Victoria's face had gone pale, her champagne glass forgotten in her hand. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The girl was supposed to fumble to prove that talent belonged to the cultured, the educated, the wealthy, not to some vagrant child who'd walked in off the street. But Amelia wasn't done. As she reached the piece's return to the main theme, she did something unexpected. She began to embellish, not in a showy, inappropriate way, but with subtle ornamentations that enhanced the melody without destroying its integrity. It was the kind of thing only a truly musical person would dare attempt, and only a skilled one could pull off. The audience was transfixed. Some had moved closer, drawn by the magnetic pull of the performance. Others stood frozen where they were afraid that any movement might break the spell. The servers had stopped. Serving, the bartender had stopped pouring, and even the rain against the windows seemed to quiet in deference to the music filling the space. As Amelia approached the final phrases, she allowed herself to look up briefly. The faces watching her had transformed. Where there had been mockery, she now saw wonder. Where there had been disdain, she saw respect. And in Dr. Chun's eyes, she saw something that made her heart leap recognition. Not of her, but of what she was, a true musician. The last notes of Für Elise faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The only sound was the rain returning to its steady rhythm against the windows. Then Dr. Chun began to clap. Slowly at first, then faster, and others joined in tentatively, as if unsure whether applauding was appropriate given the circumstances. But the applause grew, spreading through the crowd, like wildfire of a different sort than the laughter had been. "Brava, Doctor!" Chun said, his voice carrying over the clapping. "Absolutely brava." Amelia stood and turned to face Victoria, whose face had gone from pale to flushed. "I believe I played it perfectly," Amelia said quietly. "Not a single missed note." Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Around her, the crowd was murmuring their earlier cruelty, forgotten in the face of what they'd just witnessed. "The buffet is over there," someone said, pointing. "Help yourself, dear." But Amelia didn't move toward the food yet. Instead, she looked directly at Victoria and said, "My grandmother always told me that music was the great equalizer, that it doesn't care about your clothes or your address or your bank account. All it cares about is the truth in your heart and the skill in your hands." She paused, letting her words sink in. I guess she was right. "Who are you?" Dr. Chun asked, moving closer. That wasn't just technically proficient, that was musical. Deeply musical. "Who taught you to play like that?" "My grandmother. Like I said, Betty Washington. She was second chair violin with the Philharmonic from 1975 to 1990. But she could play everything: violin, piano, cello. She taught me that music wasn't just about the notes. It was about connecting with something bigger than yourself." Dr. Chun's eyes widened. "Betty Washington. I remember her. She was brilliant. There were rumors she could have been first chair, but..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "But she was black," Amelia finished for him. "And it was a different time. She knew what she was up against. That's why she made sure I learned not just to play, but to play so well that no one could deny me. Even though she's gone now and I'm..." She gestured at herself like this. "Gone," Dr. Chun's voice was gentle. "I'm so sorry. When 3 months ago, cancer. We lost our apartment after the medical bills and..." Amelia shrugged, trying to look casual about it, even as her throat tightened. "Things have been hard, but I still practice whenever I can find a piano. Churches mostly. Community centers. I sneak into the music store on 47th sometimes until they kick me out." The crowd was listening now, really listening. Some looked ashamed. Others looked angry, but not at Amelia. At themselves, perhaps, or at Victoria, who seemed to be trying to shrink into the floor. "You should be in school," someone said. "In a music program." Amelia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You need an address to go to school. You need clean clothes, supplies, a guardian. I'm working on it, but for now..." She shrugged again. "This is unacceptable," Dr. Chun said, his voice rising. "A talent like this living on the streets. Where is the system? Where are the programs we're all here supposedly supporting?" "They're for kids with potential," Victoria said, finally finding her voice. Her tone was defensive, brittle. "Kids who show promise, who have the foundation for..." "For what?" Dr. Chun rounded on her. "This child just played Für Elise better than half the students at Juilliard could manage. She showed not just technical skill, but true musicality. If that's not potential, if that's not promise, then what is?" "She's probably lying about all of it," Victoria said desperately. "The grandmother, the background. It's probably just a sob story too." "I knew Betty Washington," Dr. Chun interrupted. She was one of the finest musicians I ever had the privilege of working with. And if this is her granddaughter, then what we've just witnessed makes perfect sense. Betty had the kind of musical understanding that can't be taught. It can only be nurtured. And clearly, she nurtured it in this child. He turned back to Amelia. Do you know any other pieces? Amelia nodded. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat, major Bach's inventions, most of them Mozart's Sonata No. 11. The first movement. Some Debussy. Grandma believed in a classical foundation, but she also taught me jazz blues. She said music was music, and boundaries were for people who were afraid to explore. Would you play something else? Dr. Chun asked. Not for food, not to prove anything to anyone. Just, would you play? Amelia looked around the room. The hostility had mostly faded, replaced by curiosity, and in some faces, shame. She thought about leaving, about taking some food, and disappearing back into the night. But then she thought about Grandma Betty again, about all those hours of practice, about the music that lived inside her, begging to be heard. Okay, she said, for my grandmother. She sat back down at the piano and began to play Chopin's Nocturne. If Für Elise had been a demonstration of technical skill, this was pure emotion. The melody sang out full of longing and loss, beauty and pain. Amelia poured everything into it, her grief over losing her grandmother, her fear about the future, her anger at a world that could be so cruel, and somehow still her hope that things could get better. The music filled the ballroom, transforming it. The chandelier's light seemed softer. The rain against the windows became part of the rhythm, and for a few minutes, everyone in that room was connected by the shared experience of beauty emerging from suffering. When she finished, there were tears on several faces. Dr. Chun was openly weeping. My God, he said softly. My God. That was... Someone started, then stopped, unable to find words. Amelia stood up slowly. Thank you for listening, she said simply. I'll just take some food and go now. No, Dr. Chun said firmly. No, you won't just go. This is wrong. All of this is wrong. He turned to address the crowd. We're here patting ourselves on the back for supporting arts education, for nurturing young talent. And meanwhile, a child with more musical gift than most of us will ever possess is living on the streets, sneaking into music stores to practice. What does that say about us? What does that say about our supposed commitment to the arts? Robert, please, Victoria said. You're being dramatic. One talented child doesn't what? Dr. Chun's voice was rising. Doesn't matter, doesn't deserve the same opportunities we're so eager to provide to children who already have everything. He looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. How many others are out there? How many Betty Washington's grandchildren are we ignoring because they don't come in the right package? It's not our responsibility to, Victoria started. Then whose is it? Dr. Chun demanded. We have the resources, the connections, the power to make a difference. And what do? We hold galas where we congratulate ourselves, while children with extraordinary gifts go hungry. And he turned back to Amelia. I want to help. Will you let me help? Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. I don't need charity. This isn't charity. This is justice. This is what should have happened the moment your grandmother died. Someone should have made sure you were taken care of, that your gift was nurtured. I can't undo the past 3 months, but I can make sure the next 3 months are different. Robert, you can't just... Victoria protested. I can and I will, he said firmly. I have a spare room in my apartment. I have connections at Juilliard, at Manhattan School of Music. I have instruments, sheet music, everything a young musician needs. What I haven't had is a student worthy of that legacy. He looked at Amelia. Will you let me teach you, not as charity, but as an investment in the future of music itself? The room was silent, everyone waiting for Amelia's response. She thought about the shelter she'd slept in last night, about the cold, about the hunger. But more than that, she thought about the piano in Dr. Chun's apartment, about the possibility of playing every day, of learning, of becoming everything Grandma Betty had believed she could be. There's one thing I need to know first, Amelia said. Anything, Dr. Chun replied. Do you have any recordings of my grandmother playing? Dr. Chun smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. I have several, including one of her playing the Brahms violin concerto that will take your breath away. Amelia felt tears roll down her cheeks. Then yes, I'll come with you. The room erupted. Some people were applauding, others were talking excitedly, and a few were pulling out their checkbooks, suddenly inspired to make real contributions to arts education. Victoria stood frozen in the center of it all, her carefully constructed evening in ruins. Wait, Amelia said, and the room quieted again. She walked over to her backpack and pulled out something wrapped in plastic, a small battered notebook. Before we go, there's something else. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing pages covered in musical notation. These are my grandmother's compositions. She wrote them but never got to perform them publicly. She said the world wasn't ready for a black woman's symphonies. But maybe now. Dr. Chun took the notebook with reverent hands, flipping through the pages. His eyes widened. These are brilliant. Complex, innovative, but accessible. They should be performed. They should be recorded. That's what I want, Amelia said. Not just to play other people's music, but to bring hers into the world. To give her the recognition she never got. We'll do it, Dr. Chun said immediately. I'll call the Philharmonic tomorrow. They owe Betty Washington that much at least. As the crowd began to disperse, talking excitedly about what they'd witnessed, Amelia walked to the buffet. She was still hungry after all. But as she filled a plate, she realized something had changed. She wasn't just feeding her body anymore. She was feeding her future. Dr. Chun appeared beside her. There's someone I want you to meet, he said, gesturing to a young woman with a camera. This is Sarah Chen, a documentary filmmaker. She's been recording tonight. Recording? Amelia felt a flutter of panic. Don't worry, Sarah said quickly. I won't use any of it without your permission. But what happened here tonight, it's important. People should see it. The cruelty, yes, but also the triumph. Your triumph. I don't know, Amelia said uncertainly. Think about it, Sarah said. No pressure. But your story could help other kids in your situation. It could change things. As Amelia considered this, Victoria approached. Her face was carefully composed, but Amelia could see the anger underneath. I hope you're satisfied, Victoria said coldly. You've ruined my gala. No, Amelia said quietly. You ruined it yourself when you decided to make cruelty into entertainment. I just played the piano. Victoria's face flushed. You think you're special because you can play a few pieces. You think this changes anything. You're still just a homeless child who doesn't belong here. You're right, Amelia said, surprising Victoria. I don't belong here. Because here is a place where people's worth is measured by their clothes and their bank accounts instead of their hearts and their talents. My grandmother taught me better than that. She turned to Dr. Chun. Can we go now? I'd like to see that spare room and maybe play your piano. Of course, he said, offering her his arm like she was a proper lady instead of a 12-year-old in torn sneakers. We have much to discuss. Your repertoire, your education, both musical and academic. You'll need to be enrolled in school, of course. And we should talk about summer programs, competitions, performance opportunities." As they walked toward the door, the crowd parted respectfully. Some nodded, others smiled, and a few even whispered, "Beautiful playing," as she passed. It was a far cry from the mockery she'd faced just an hour ago. Just before they reached the exit, Amelia turned back to look at the Steinway one more time. In a strange way, she felt grateful to Victoria for her cruelty. Without it, she might never have had the chance to prove herself, might never have met Dr. Chun, might never have found a path forward. "Thank you," she called out to Victoria, who was standing alone by the piano, her perfect evening in ruins around her. Victoria's head snapped up. "For what?" "For reminding me that the greatest performances come not from perfect circumstances, but from the need to prove that beauty exists even in the most unexpected places. My grandmother would have appreciated the lesson." Then she walked out into the November rain, but this time she wasn't alone. This time she had a future. And somewhere she was certain Grandma Betty was smiling. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time they reached Dr. Chun's car, a modest sedan that surprised Amelia given his fame. "Were you expecting a limousine?" he asked, noticing her expression. "I don't know what I was expecting," she admitted. "I learned long ago that true wealth isn't about what you display to the world," he said, opening the door for her. "It's about what you can give to it. Your grandmother understood that. She gave the world beauty through her music, even when the world didn't always give her the recognition she deserved." As they drove through the wet streets of Manhattan, Amelia watched the city lights blur past the windows. 3 months ago, these same streets had seemed hostile, full of danger and indifference. Now they looked different, still challenging, but full of possibility. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course." "Why did you really stand up for me back there? You could have just stayed quiet like everyone else." Dr. Chun was silent for a moment, navigating through traffic. "When I was young, younger than you, my parents brought me to this country from South Korea. I spoke no English, had no friends, but I could play piano. Music was my language when words failed me. There was a teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who saw past the foreign kid, who ate strange food and couldn't conjugate verbs properly. She saw a musician. She fought for me to get lessons, to enter competitions, to be heard. Without her, I would never have had the career I've had." He glanced at her. "Tonight, when you walked into that ballroom, I saw myself 40 years ago. Different circumstances, same fundamental challenge, proving you deserve to be heard regardless of what package you come in. I couldn't stand by and watch history repeat itself. But I'm nobody special. I'm just—" "Stop," he said firmly. "You're Betty Washington's granddaughter. You're a young woman who's survived 3 months on the streets without losing your ability to make beauty. You're a musician who just made a room full of cynics remember why music matters. You are anything but nobody." They pulled up to a brownstone on the Upper West Side. It wasn't the most expensive neighborhood, but it was clean, safe worlds away from the shelters Amelia had known. "This is it," Dr. Chun said. "Your new home if you'll have it." The apartment was on the 3rd floor. As they climbed the stairs, Amelia's heart began to race. What if this was all a dream? What if she woke up tomorrow back in the shelter? Dr. Chun opened the door and turned on the lights. The apartment was simple, but warm walls lined with bookshelves, musical scores scattered on surfaces, photographs of performances around the world. And there, as in the living room, stood a Bosendorfer grand piano, its wood gleaming in the lamplight. "It was my teacher's," Dr. Chun said softly. "Mrs. Rodriguez. She left it to me when she died. I've been waiting for the right student to share it with." Amelia approached the piano slowly, reverently. She ran her fingers along its surface, feeling the decades of music that had been played on it. "May I?" she asked. "It's yours to play whenever you want," he said. "Day or night. Music doesn't follow schedules." She sat down and began to play not Chopin or Bach, but something of her own. A melody that had been forming in her mind during the dark nights in shelters, a piece that captured both loss and hope, ending and beginning. It wasn't perfect, it needed work development, but it was hers. "You compose," Dr. Chun said. It wasn't a question. Grandma said music was a conversation. Sometimes you repeat what others have said, but sometimes you have to add your own voice. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start properly. Technique, work, theory, history. You have natural talent, but talent without discipline is just potential. We're going to turn that potential into mastery." "And school?" "I'll call the Branson Academy tomorrow. They have scholarships for gifted students. Your academic education is just as important as your musical one. Your grandmother would insist on that." Amelia nodded, suddenly exhausted. The events of the evening were catching up with her, the fear, the performance, the unexpected turn her life had taken. "Your room is down the hall," Dr. Chun said gently. "It's simple, but it's yours. We'll go shopping tomorrow for clothes supplies, whatever you need. But tonight, just rest." The room was small but clean, with a single bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto a tree-lined street. After months of shelters and sometimes doorways, it felt like a palace. "Dr. Chun," she called as he was leaving. "Thank you. Not just for this, but for believing. For seeing me instead of just what I looked like." "Thank Victoria Sterling," he said with a wry smile. "If she hadn't been so cruel, I might not have been moved to act. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes." After he left, Amelia sat on the bed, and pulled out her grandmother's notebook. She flipped to the last page where Betty had written a note. "My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But music is never gone. It lives in you now, in your hands, your heart, your soul. The world may not always be kind, but music will always be true. Play with courage, compose with honesty, and never forget that you carry the songs of all who came before you. You are my greatest composition. Love, Grandma." Tears fell onto the page, but for the first time in 3 months, they weren't tears of grief or fear. They were tears of gratitude, of possibility, of a future that suddenly seemed bright despite everything she'd lost. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. She'd have to catch up academically, prove herself at a new school, work harder than she'd ever worked to justify Dr. Chun's faith in her. But tonight, she was safe, warm, and surrounded by music. She could almost hear Grandma Betty's voice. "See, baby girl, truth always finds a way to be heard. You just have to be brave enough to speak it." As rain continued to patter against the window, Amelia lay down in her new bed, and for the first time in months fell asleep without fear of tomorrow. The morning sun streamed through the window of Amelia's new room, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. For a moment, she forgot where she was, instinctively reaching for the thin shelter blanket that wasn't there. Then, memory flooded back the gala, the performance, Dr. Chun's kindness, and she sat up quickly, half afraid she'd dreamed it all. A gentle knock at the door confirmed her new reality. "Amelia, I've made breakfast," Dr. Chun called. "We have a busy day ahead." She found him in the kitchen, setting out plates of scrambled eggs and toast. It was simple food, but after months of soup kitchens and scrounged meals, it looked like a feast. As she ate, trying not to appear too eager, Dr. Chun outlined the day's plans. "First, we'll visit Branson Academy. The headmaster, Dr. Williams, is expecting us at 10. Then shopping for clothes and school supplies. This afternoon, we begin your real musical education." He studied her over his coffee cup. I should warn you I'm a demanding teacher. Your grandmother gave you an excellent foundation, but there's much work ahead. I'm not afraid of work, Amelia said quietly. Grandma always said that talent without discipline is just noise waiting to happen. Dr. Chun smiled. Betty was wise. Now finish your breakfast. We need to make you presentable for Branson. The clothes shopping came first at Dr. Chun's insistence. First impressions matter, unfortunately, he said, as they entered a modest department store. It shouldn't be that way, but the world judges books by their covers. He selected simple but quality pieces, nothing flashy, just clean, well-fitting clothes that would help her blend in at an elite school. Standing in the dressing room, looking at herself in new jeans and a soft blue sweater, Amelia barely recognized her reflection. The girl staring back looked like she belonged somewhere, like she had a future. She touched the glass gently, thinking of all the mirrors in store windows she'd avoided passing these last 3 months, not wanting to see what she'd become. Branson Academy occupied an entire city block on the Upper East Side, its red brick facade and manicured entrance speaking of old money and older traditions. Amelia's stomach clenched as they approached the massive wooden doors. This was the kind of place where Victoria Sterling's children would go, where everyone would know she didn't belong. Dr. Williams, the headmaster, was a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was all dark wood and leather-bound books, diplomas from Harvard and Yale prominent on the walls. But when he shook Amelia's hand, his grip was warm and welcoming. Dr. Chun has told me about your extraordinary talent, he said, gesturing for them to sit, and about your recent circumstances. I want you to know that Branson Academy has a long tradition of nurturing exceptional students regardless of their background. With respect, sir, Amelia said, finding her voice, I've heard that before. People say they don't care about background, but then they care very much when that background is sleeping in shelters. Dr. Williams leaned back in his chair, regarding her thoughtfully. You're right to be skeptical. Many institutions pay lip service to diversity and inclusion without following through. But let me tell you something about Branson. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the campus courtyard. 40 years ago, I was a scholarship student here. My father was a janitor, my mother cleaned houses. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong. He turned back to them. Every year, Branson reserves 5 full scholarships for students with exceptional gifts who lack exceptional means. We call it the Phoenix Program for students rising from difficult circumstances. You wouldn't be our charity case, Amelia. You'd be an investment in Branson's future. Your success would be our success. And if I fail? Amelia asked. Then we fail with you and try again, Dr. Williams said simply. But something tells me failure isn't in your vocabulary. He pulled out a folder. Dr. Chun sent me a video from last night. Your performance at the Sterling Gala. Would you like to know what our music director said when she saw it? Amelia nodded, bracing herself. She said, "Get that girl here before Juilliard Prep snatches her up." Dr. Williams smiled at her surprise. You'll start Monday. That gives you the weekend to prepare. Your schedule will be challenging accelerated academics to help you catch up, plus our advanced music program. Dr. Chun will continue your private instruction, but you'll also work with our music faculty. There's one thing, Amelia said. I write music, compose. Will I be able to continue that? Compose. Dr. Williams's eyes lit up. We have a student composition showcase every spring. The winning piece is performed by the New York Youth Symphony. Perhaps you'll have something ready by then. As they left Branson, Amelia felt a mix of excitement and terror. The school was beautiful but intimidating, full of students who'd never wondered where their next meal would come from. How could she fit in there? You're thinking too loud, Dr. Chun said as they walked. How did you? Your grandmother did the same thing. Her face would scrunch up when she was worrying. He stopped walking and turned to her. Listen to me. You belong anywhere your talent can take you. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. That afternoon, back at the apartment, Amelia's real education began. Dr. Chun sat her at the Bosendorfer and simply watched as she played scales. His face revealed nothing, but she could feel him cataloging every strength and weakness. Your fingering is unconventional, he said when she finished. Betty taught you her own method, didn't she? She said the traditional ways weren't always the best ways, especially if you had small hands like mine. She wasn't wrong, but you'll need to know both ways. Some pieces demand traditional fingering. He sat beside her on the bench. Watch. For the next 2 hours, he worked with her on technique, hand position, arm weight, pedaling. It was more intense and detailed than anything Grandma Betty had put her through, but Amelia absorbed it all hungrily. This was what she'd been missing, what she needed to move from good to great. Now, Dr. Chun said, play me something you've composed. Amelia hesitated. Her own pieces felt so small compared to the master's, but she placed her hands on the keys and began to play the piece she'd started the night before, the one about loss and hope. As she played, she let herself remember everything Grandma Betty's last days, the fear of the streets, the hunger, but also the kindness of strangers, the beauty that persisted even in dark places. When she finished, Dr. Chun was quiet for a long moment. How long have you been working on that? It's been in my head for weeks, but I only started really forming it last night. It needs development, he said, and her heart sank. But the bones are extraordinary. The harmonic progressions in the B section, did Betty teach you that? No, I just heard it. Is it wrong? Not wrong, unexpected, sophisticated. With work, this could be something special. He pulled out manuscript paper. Write it down. Everything you just played. We'll work on developing it together. As Amelia began notating her composition, a strange feeling washed over her. For the first time since Grandma Betty died, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The weekend flew by in a blur of preparation. Dr. Chun worked with her relentlessly, not just on music, but on catching up academically. He'd somehow procured textbooks and spent hours helping her review math and science concepts she'd missed during her months away from school. Education is like music, he said, during a particularly challenging algebra session. Everything builds on what came before. We just need to fill in the gaps. Sunday evening, as Amelia packed her new backpack for her first day at Branson, anxiety crept in. She walked to the Bosendorfer seeking comfort in its keys. But instead of playing classical pieces, she found herself playing the blues progression Grandma Betty had taught her years ago. Music is honest, Grandma had said. It don't lie about what you're feeling. You feeling sad? Play sad. You feeling scared? Play scared. But play it true, and somehow it becomes beautiful. Dr. Chun appeared in the doorway. Nervous about tomorrow? Terrified, Amelia admitted. Good. Comfort is the enemy of growth. But remember, you've already faced worse than anything Branson can throw at you. You've survived loss, homelessness, humiliation. A few privileged teenagers should be easy by comparison. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Amelia's mood. Dr. Chun walked her to Branson, sensing she needed the support. As they approached the entrance, students were arriving in luxury cars, wearing designer clothes, chatting in groups that seemed impenetrable. Breathe, Dr. Chun murmured, and remember you earned this. The first person to approach her wasn't a student, but a teacher, a young woman with bright eyes and paint stains on her fingers. You must be Amelia. I'm Ms. Rodriguez, the music composition teacher. Dr. Williams showed me your performance video. I've been dying to meet you. The name stopped Amelia cold. Rodriguez, did you know someone named Mrs. Rodriguez who taught piano? Miss Rodriguez's face lit up. My grandmother. She passed away 5 years ago. But wait, how did you know her? She was Dr. Chun's teacher, Amelia said, wonderment in her voice. The Bosendorfer I've been practicing on was hers. Ms. Rodriguez's eyes filled with tears. That piano. I learned on that piano. She always said it was waiting for the right student. And now here you are, connecting all these threads. She squeezed Amelia's shoulder. This feels like fate, doesn't it? The morning classes were challenging, but manageable. Amelia was behind in some areas, but ahead in others. Her reading comprehension was excellent, thanks to all the hours Grandma Betty had made her read music theory and history books. Math was harder, but she found that understanding musical intervals and rhythmic subdivisions actually helped with fractions and ratios. It was lunchtime when the real test came. Amelia entered the cafeteria tray in hand and felt every eye turn toward her. Whispers rippled through the room. She recognized the tone. It was the same one from the Sterling Gala before she'd played. That's her, someone said, not quite quietly enough. The homeless girl from the Sterling video. My mother was there. She said it was absolutely mortifying how Victoria treated her. I heard she's living with Robert Chun now. My piano teacher would kill for that opportunity. Amelia found an empty table in the corner, but she'd barely sat down when 3 girls approached. The one in the lead was everything Amelia wasn't: tall, blonde, wearing clothes that probably cost more than a month's rent. You're Amelia, the girl said. It wasn't a question. Yes. I'm Charlotte Sterling, Victoria's daughter. Amelia's stomach dropped. She set down her fork, carefully preparing for the attack. But Charlotte surprised her. I wanted to apologize. For my mother. What she did was cruel and unnecessary. You don't need to apologize for her, Amelia said carefully. Actually, I do. Charlotte sat down uninvited, and her friends followed suit. You don't know this, but my mother has been using that same test for years, making people perform for her amusement, setting them up to fail. She did it to my friend's younger brother, once made him solve math problems in front of everyone at a dinner party. He cried. She laughed. Charlotte pulled out her phone and showed Amelia a video. It was from the gala, but from a different angle. It showed Victoria's face clearly as Amelia played the progression from smug satisfaction to shock to fury. I've watched this about 50 times, Charlotte said. It's the first time I've ever seen someone beat her at her own game. You didn't just play perfectly, you exposed her for what she is. I didn't mean to expose anyone, Amelia said. I just wanted to eat. And that makes it even better, Charlotte said. Charlotte, you weren't trying to prove anything. You just were yourself, and that was enough to bring her whole worldview crashing down. One of Charlotte's friends leaned forward. Is it true Dr. Chun is teaching you? Amelia nodded. God, you're so lucky. My parents have been trying to get me lessons with him for 3 years. He doesn't take students anymore. He took me, Amelia said quietly. Because you're special, Charlotte said matter-of-factly. Look, I know we seem like privileged jerks, and honestly, most of us are. But some of us recognize real talent when we see it. And what you have is real. As the day progressed, Amelia found that Charlotte's public acceptance smoothed her path considerably. Other students began approaching her, curious but not cruel. By the time she reached her afternoon music theory class, she was feeling almost optimistic. The music wing of Branson was a world unto itself, soundproof practice rooms, a recording studio, a concert hall that rivaled some professional venues. Ms. Rodriguez introduced her to the other composition students, a mix of personalities united by their love of creating music. "Amelia's going to play one of her pieces for us," Ms. Rodriguez announced, and Amelia's blood ran cold. She hadn't prepared anything, hadn't expected to perform on her first day. But then she thought of Grandma Betty. "Never miss a chance to share your music, baby girl," and walked to the piano. She played the piece she'd been developing with Dr. Chun, the one about loss and hope. She'd added to it over the weekend, incorporating some of the techniques he'd taught her. When she finished, the room was silent. Then a boy with wild red hair and thick glasses spoke up. "That harmonic progression in measure 32, how did you think of that?" "I didn't think of it," Amelia said. "I heard it. Sometimes music just arrives." "But that's not how it works," another student protested. "You have to understand theory first, then apply it." "Or," Ms. Rodriguez interrupted gently, "you can feel it first and understand it later. There's no one right way to compose. Mozart heard entire symphonies in his head. Beethoven labored over every note. Both created masterpieces." The class launched into a spirited debate about intuition versus education in composition, and Amelia found herself at the center of it, her opinion sought and valued. It was intoxicating. After school, Dr. Chun was waiting for her. "How was it?" "Overwhelming, exciting, terrifying." She paused. "I met Charlotte Sterling." His eyebrows rose. "And she apologized for her mother. She was actually nice." "People can surprise you," Dr. Chun said, "even especially the ones you think you have figured out." That evening, as Amelia practiced on the Bosendorfer, the apartment's doorbell rang. Dr. Chun answered it, and she heard familiar voices, Ms. Rodriguez and someone else. "Amelia," Dr. Chun called, "you have visitors." Ms. Rodriguez entered with an elderly black man who walked with a cane but whose eyes were sharp and bright. "Amelia, this is James Patterson. He was the principal bassist with the Philharmonic for 40 years. He knew your grandmother well." Mr. Patterson studied her with those keen eyes. "Lord, you look just like Betty when she was young. Same determined chin, same way of holding yourself, like you're ready to take on the world." "You knew her?" Amelia's voice was barely a whisper. "Knew her, child. I loved her. We all did." Betty Washington was the soul of that orchestra. She could make that violin weep or sing or shout hallelujah, and when they pushed her out, he stopped shaking his head. "One of the darkest days in Philharmonic history. Pushed her out." Amelia frowned. She said she retired to teach. Mr. Patterson and Ms. Rodriguez exchanged glances. "What do you know about your grandmother's last year with the orchestra?" "Not much. She didn't talk about it." Mr. Patterson sat heavily in a chair. "Betty was in line to become concertmaster. She'd earned it first chair, second violin for 15 years, filling in as concertmaster whenever needed, respected by everyone. But in 1990, when the position officially opened, they gave it to someone else. Someone younger, whiter, with half Betty's experience." Amelia felt anger rise in her chest. "That's not fair." "Fair," Mr. Patterson laughed bitterly. "Fair had nothing to do with it. This was 1990, but might as well have been 1950 for all the progress we'd made. Betty could have fought it, could have made a public fuss. But she had dignity. She retired quietly, said she wanted to teach. But we all knew. Why didn't she tell me?" "Probably didn't want you carrying her bitterness," Ms. Rodriguez said gently. She wanted you to approach music with joy, not anger. But I am angry, Amelia said. She deserved better. Yes, she did, Dr. Chun said. And the best way to honor that is to take every opportunity she didn't get. To go as far as your talent can take you without letting anyone push you aside. Mr. Patterson pulled out an old photograph. It showed the orchestra from 1985, and there was Grandma Betty young and radiant, her violin raised, caught mid-performance. Keep this, he said. Remember where you come from, but more importantly, remember where you're going. After they left, Amelia sat at the piano processing everything she'd learned. She began to play not a piece she knew, but something new, something that captured the injustice and dignity of her grandmother's story. The notes came fast and fierce, then soft and mournful, then proud and defiant. Write that down, Dr. Chun said urgently. Now while it's fresh. She grabbed manuscript paper and began notating frantically, trying to capture the raw emotion before it faded. This wasn't just music anymore. It was testimony history, truth-telling through sound. Over the next weeks, Amelia fell into a rhythm. Days at Branson where she was catching up academically faster than anyone expected. Afternoons with Dr. Chun pushing her technical abilities to new heights. Evenings composing, developing what she'd come to think of as Betty's Suite, a series of pieces honoring her grandmother's journey. Charlotte Sterling became an unexpected ally, using her social position to shield Amelia from the worst of the gossip and speculation. They made an odd pair, the socialite and the former homeless girl, but they found common ground in their complicated relationships with their mothers. At least your grandmother loved you, Charlotte said one afternoon as they studied together. My mother loves what I represent, her legacy, her status. But me, the actual person, I don't think she's ever seen me. She might surprise you, Amelia said, remembering Dr. Chun's words. People can change. Charlotte laughed humorlessly. Victoria Sterling doesn't change. She adjusts her strategy. As if to prove Charlotte's point, news came the next day that Victoria was launching a new initiative, a music program for disadvantaged youth. The cynicism was breathtaking, but the program was real, with real funding and real opportunities for kids who needed them. She's trying to rehabilitate her image, Charlotte said disgustedly. Maybe, Amelia said, but if it helps even one kid get access to music education, does it matter why she's doing it? Ms. Rodriguez overheard them. That's a very mature perspective, Amelia. Good can come from imperfect motivations. The weeks turned into months. Amelia's skills grew exponentially under Dr. Chun's tutelage. She performed at school concerts, small recitals, always growing more confident. But it was her composing that truly set her apart. The pieces she wrote weren't just technically proficient. They told stories, conveyed emotions that left audiences breathless. One evening in late February, Dr. Chun came home with news. The Philharmonic wants to program one of Betty's compositions, the one for violin and orchestra. They want to premiere it in their spring gala. Amelia nearly dropped the glass she was holding. Really? There's more. They want you to play piano in the performance. And, he paused for effect, they want to premiere one of your pieces as well. The first movement of Betty's Suite. But I'm nobody. I'm just a student. You're Betty Washington's granddaughter. You're the girl who stood up to Victoria Sterling. You're a young composer with a unique voice. You're somebody, Amelia. It's time you believed it. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She stood at the window looking out at the city lights and talked to her grandmother in her mind. We did it, Grandma. They're going to play your music. The world is finally going to hear what you created. She could almost hear Betty's voice in response. No, baby girl. You did it. You kept the music alive. You told the truth with those keys, and this is just the beginning." The announcement of the Philharmonic program caused a sensation. The story was irresistible, the homeless prodigy honoring her overlooked grandmother, the orchestra attempting to right historical wrongs. Interview requests poured in, but Dr. Chun helped Amelia navigate them carefully, choosing only a few that would tell the story respectfully. Sarah Chen, the documentary filmmaker from the gala, had been following Amelia's journey. Her footage from that night combined with interviews and rehearsal footage was becoming something powerful. "This isn't just about you," Sarah explained. "It's about all the talent we lose because of prejudice, poverty, circumstances. Your story could change things." March arrived with a late snowstorm that blanketed the city in white. Amelia walked through Central Park, her footsteps crunching in fresh snow, thinking about how much had changed since that rainy November night. She wasn't hungry anymore, wasn't scared, wasn't alone. But she carried those experiences with her. They informed her music, gave it depth and authenticity that couldn't be taught. At Branson, she'd moved from curiosity to accepted member of the community. Her composition for the spring showcase was nearly complete, a piano concerto that told the story of loss and redemption, of falling and rising, of music as salvation. "It's ambitious," Ms. Rodriguez said, reviewing the score. "A concerto is challenging for even experienced composers. But this," she shook her head in wonder, "this is special. The committee is going to lose their minds." Dr. Chun had become more than a teacher, he'd become family. They'd developed routines, inside jokes, a comfortable rhythm of living. He'd legally become her guardian, ensuring she'd never return to the streets. But more than that, he'd given her something she'd lost when Grandma Betty died, someone who believed in her completely. "You know," he said one evening as they prepared dinner together, "I thought I was saving you that night at the gala, but I think maybe you saved me too." From what? From becoming one of them. From forgetting why music matters. From losing touch with what my own teacher tried to teach me, that music is meant to heal, to unite, to elevate, not to exclude. The Philharmonic rehearsals began in early April. Walking into David Geffen Hall for the first time, Amelia felt the weight of history. This was where Grandma Betty should have been concertmaster, where she'd been denied her rightful place. Now, 35 years later, her granddaughter would stand on that stage and play Betty's truth for the world to hear. The orchestra members were professional but warm, many approaching Amelia with stories about Betty. "She taught my daughter," one violinist said. "Refused payment, said music was meant to be shared. She could make that violin talk," another remembered. "Sometimes I swear it was speaking English." The conductor, Maestro Chen, was particularly kind. "I studied your grandmother's compositions. They're remarkably sophisticated, ahead of their time in many ways. It's criminal they were never performed." "Why weren't they?" Amelia asked. Maestro Chen's expression was carefully neutral. The classical music world wasn't ready for a black woman composer. Maybe it still isn't entirely ready, but we're trying to be better. As they rehearsed Betty's violin concerto with the principal violinist, as soloist, Amelia heard her grandmother's voice in every phrase. The music was complex but accessible, classical in structure, but influenced by jazz and blues, a perfect representation of Betty herself. When it came time to rehearse Amelia's piece, she took her place at the piano with trembling hands. The first movement of Betty's suite was the most personal thing she'd ever written, laying bare her grief, her love, her anger at injustice, her hope for redemption. As she played the opening notes, the orchestra entering behind her like a wave of support, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From that desperate night at the Sterling Gala to this moment preparing to perform at one of the world's great concert halls. The music swelled around her, her grandmother's spirit alive in every note. The orchestra's final note hung in the air like a held breath before Maestro Chen lowered his baton. The silence that followed felt sacred, as if everyone in the rehearsal hall understood they'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Amelia's hands remained on the piano keys, trembling slightly from the emotional weight of what she'd just played. "That was remarkable," Maestro Chen said softly, his usual professional demeanor cracking to reveal genuine emotion. "The pain in the second theme, the way it transforms into hope, your grandmother would be proud." The principal cellist, an older woman with silver hair, wiped tears from her eyes. "I played with Betty for 10 years. That piece, it's like hearing her voice again." As Amelia gathered her sheet music, the orchestra members began approaching her one by one, sharing memories, offering encouragement. She felt Grandma Betty's presence so strongly, it was almost physical, like warm hands on her shoulders guiding her forward. The performance was set for May 15th, just 2 weeks away. The pressure was immense, but Amelia found herself thriving under it. Every morning she woke at 5 to practice before school, her fingers running through passages until they became part of her muscle memory. Dr. Chun pushed her harder than ever, demanding perfection, not for its own sake, but because the music deserved it. "This isn't just a performance," he reminded her during a particularly intense session. "This is a reclamation. Your grandmother's voice was silenced, and now you're giving it back to the world. That requires everything you have." At Branson, word had spread about the upcoming Philharmonic performance. Even students who'd never shown interest in classical music were talking about it. Charlotte Sterling had become something of a protective force, shutting down any negative comments with the kind of sharp authority only someone of her social standing could wield. "My mother's coming to the performance," Charlotte mentioned one day at lunch, her tone carefully neutral. Amelia nearly choked on her sandwich. "Victoria's coming. She bought a table. $10,000. It's supposedly for her new youth music initiative, but I know better. She's trying to rewrite history, to position herself as having discovered you rather than having tried to humiliate you. Maybe she's genuinely changed," Amelia suggested, though doubt colored her voice. Charlotte's laugh was bitter. "My mother doesn't change, Amelia. She adapts. There's a difference." That afternoon, Ms. Rodriguez pulled Amelia aside after composition class. "There's something you should know. The documentary Sarah Chen has been working on, it's been picked up by Netflix. They want to release it the week after your Philharmonic performance." Amelia felt her stomach drop. "But I haven't even seen it yet." "Sarah wants to show it to you this weekend. She says she won't release anything you're not comfortable with, but, Amelia..." Ms. Rodriguez paused, choosing her words carefully. "This could be important, not just for you, but for every talented kid who's been overlooked because of their circumstances." That Saturday, Amelia sat in a small screening room, with Dr. Chun watching her story unfold on screen. Sarah had crafted something powerful, intercutting footage from the Sterling Gala, with interviews, rehearsal footage, and devastating statistics about how many children from low-income families never get access to music education. The hardest part to watch was the footage from the gala itself. Seeing Victoria's cruel smile, hearing the crowd's laughter, watching her own 12-year-old self stand there absorbing their mockery, it brought all the pain flooding back. But then came the transformation, the moment when she began to play, and the laughter died, replaced by wonder. "You changed the energy in that room," Sarah's voice narrated over the footage. "But more than that, you exposed something ugly about how we decide who deserves opportunity and who doesn't." The documentary included interviews with several orchestra members who'd known Betty painting a picture of systemic racism that had held back countless talented musicians. It showed Amelia's journey from the streets to the concert hall, but it never felt exploitative. Instead, it felt like truth-telling. "It's powerful," Dr. Chun said when the lights came up. "But it's your decision, Amelia. This will bring attention, not all of it comfortable." Amelia thought about all the kids like her with talent, but no access, with dreams, but no pathway. "Release it," she said firmly. "Grandma always said truth needs to be heard." The week before the performance, intensity ratcheted up to an almost unbearable level. Reporters started calling, wanting statements about the upcoming concert and documentary. The Philharmonic's publicity department was working overtime, and tickets had sold out within hours of going on sale. During a dress rehearsal, Amelia noticed a familiar figure in the otherwise empty hall. James Patterson, the elderly bassist who'd known her grandmother, had come to watch. After the run-through, he approached slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. "Betty would be so proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given her music the life it always deserved. But more than that, you've added your own voice to it. That piece you wrote, it doesn't just honor her, it continues her story." "I wish she could be here," Amelia said softly. "She is child. Every note you play carries her forward. That's how we musicians achieve immortality, through the music we leave behind and the students who carry it forward." 3 days before the performance, an unexpected visitor arrived at Dr. Chun's apartment. Amelia answered the door to find Victoria Sterling standing in the hallway, looking distinctly uncomfortable but impeccably dressed as always. "May I come in?" Victoria asked, her usual commanding tone replaced by something almost approaching humility. Amelia stepped aside wordlessly, her heart racing. Dr. Chun appeared from his study, his expression guarded. "Mrs. Sterling," he said coolly, "this is unexpected." Victoria entered the apartment, her eyes taking in the modest surroundings, the sheet music scattered everywhere, the life Amelia had built here. "I came to speak with Amelia, privately, if possible." Dr. Chun looked at Amelia, who nodded slowly. "I'll be in my study if you need me," he said, leaving them alone. Victoria sat on the edge of the sofa, her perfect posture somehow making her look more vulnerable rather than less. For a long moment she said nothing, seeming to struggle with words, perhaps for the first time in her life. "I've been thinking about that night," she finally said. "The gala. I've watched the video hundreds of times. Not the part where you play, though, that was extraordinary, but the part before, where She paused, swallowing hard. "Where I was cruel." Amelia remained silent, waiting. "I told myself I was teaching you a lesson about where you belonged. But the truth is, I was threatened. A homeless child walking into my carefully constructed world, asking for nothing more than a chance to play for food. It exposed something I'd spent my whole life avoiding." "What?" Amelia asked quietly. "That everything I have, everything I am, is built on the accident of my birth. I'm not special. I'm not more deserving. I'm just lucky. And you standing there with more talent in your little finger than I have in my entire body, despite having nothing." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "It terrified me. So you tried to humiliate me." "Yes. And in doing so, I humiliated myself." Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make amends. This is a check for your college education, Juilliard Curtis, wherever your talent takes you." Amelia looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "I don't want your money, Mrs. Sterling." "Then what do you want?" Amelia thought carefully before answering. I want you to use your position to actually help kids like me. Not for publicity, not for image rehabilitation, but because it's right. There are hundreds of talented children in this city who will never get the chances I've gotten. Help them." Victoria was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Charlotte was right about you. You're not what I expected." "What did Charlotte say?" A small, genuine smile crossed Victoria's face, the first Amelia had ever seen from her. "That you're the real deal. That you have something she calls authentic grace, the ability to maintain dignity without needing to diminish others." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I'll be at the performance. Not for the publicity, but to hear Betty Washington's music finally given its due, and to hear what her granddaughter has to say." After Victoria left, Dr. Chun emerged from his study. "That was unexpected." "People can surprise you," Amelia said, echoing his words from months ago. "Even the ones you think you have figured out." The day of the performance dawned bright and clear, the May sunshine warming the city after a long winter. Amelia woke early, her stomach a knot of nerves and excitement. Dr. Chun made her favorite breakfast French toast with strawberries, but she could barely eat. "Remember," he said gently, "this isn't about proving anything to anyone. This is about sharing your grandmother's music and your own. Everything else is just noise." At Branson, her classmates had decorated her locker with notes of encouragement. Charlotte had organized it, of course, her way of showing support without getting too emotional about it. Even teachers she'd never had classes with stopped her in the halls to wish her luck. Miss Rodriguez pulled her aside before her last class. "Whatever happens tonight, know that you've already accomplished something remarkable. You've shown that talent can come from anywhere, that music belongs to everyone. That's your real victory." The afternoon was spent in final preparation at the concert hall. The orchestra ran through the pieces one more time, the music flowing more smoothly with each repetition. Amelia's hands knew every note, every phrase, but she kept practicing anyway, kneading the familiar rhythm of keys under her fingers. Sarah Chen was there with her camera crew, documenting the final hours before the performance. "How are you feeling?" she asked during a break. "Like I'm about to jump off a cliff," Amelia admitted, "but also like I'm about to fly." As evening approached, the backstage area filled with flowers and well-wishers. Mr. Patterson arrived early, bringing a photo of the 1985 orchestra, with Betty prominently featured. "She'll be on stage with you tonight," he said, pressing the photo into Amelia's hands. Charlotte arrived with a small group from Branson, all dressed in their finest clothes. "We're in the balcony," she said. "The whole composition class is here, plus half the school. No pressure or anything." Even some of the shelter workers who'd helped Amelia during her hardest months had somehow gotten tickets. Mrs. Chen from the 92nd Street shelter hugged her tightly. "We always knew you were special, honey. We just didn't know how special." As Amelia changed into her performance dress, a simple but elegant black gown that Dr. Chun had insisted on buying, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The girl looking back wasn't the desperate child who'd walked into the Sterling Gala 6 months ago. This was someone who'd found her voice, her purpose, her power. A knock at the dressing room door interrupted her thoughts. It was Maestro Chen, looking distinguished in his tails. "5 minutes to curtain. Are you ready?" "No," Amelia said honestly. "But I'm going to do it anyway." He smiled. "That's the only honest answer to that question. Every performance is a leap of faith. But tonight, you're not leaping alone. The entire orchestra is with you. Betty's spirit is with you. And from what I've seen in the hall, about 2,000 people are with you too." As Amelia waited in the wings, she could hear the murmur of the audience settling into their seats. Somewhere out there sat Victoria Sterling, possibly rethinking her entire worldview. Somewhere sat Dr. Chun, the man who'd saved her life in more ways than one. Somewhere sat Charlotte and her classmates, Sarah Chen, with her cameras, Mr. Patterson, with his memories, and hundreds of strangers who'd come to witness something they'd been told was special. The lights dimmed, and Maestro Chen walked onto the stage to warm applause. He spoke briefly about the evening's program, about Betty Washington's overlooked legacy, about the young artist who'd brought this music to light. Then he turned toward the wings and gestured for Amelia to enter. The walk to the piano felt both endless and instant. The lights were bright, making the audience a dark mass beyond the stage's edge, but she could feel their energy, their anticipation. She sat at the piano, a Steinway concert grand, that made even the Bosendorfer at home seem small, and adjusted the bench. Maestro Chen raised his baton, and in that suspended moment before the downbeat, Amelia heard Grandma Betty's voice one more time. "Tell the truth, baby girl. Tell it beautiful, tell it proud, but most of all, tell it true." The baton fell, and Amelia began to play. The first notes of Betty's suite emerged from the piano like a prayer, soft and questioning. The orchestra entered behind her, strings shimmering like tears in candlelight. As the music built, Amelia let everything else fall away, the audience, the cameras, the weight of expectation. There was only the music, Betty's story, and her own intertwined in melody and harmony. The first movement told of loss, the ache of absence, the hollow echo of spaces once filled with love. Amelia's left hand created a foundation of grief, while her right hand searched for hope, finding fragments of melody that kept slipping away. The orchestra swelled around her, carrying the emotion to heights a piano alone could never reach. As she transitioned into the development section, the music became angry, not destructive rage, but righteous fury at injustice, at opportunities denied, at talents wasted. The piano part became technically demanding here, requiring all the skill Dr. Chun had helped her develop. Her fingers flew across the keys, but never mechanically. Every note was infused with purpose. Then came the recap, but transformed. The themes of loss were still there, but now they were joined by understanding, acceptance, even gratitude. The anger softened into determination. The searching melody from the beginning finally found its home, supported by the full orchestra, in a moment of triumph that brought tears to Amelia's eyes even as she played. The final section was pure Betty, a jazz-influenced coda that broke classical conventions just enough to make the traditionalists uncomfortable while delighting everyone else. Amelia could feel her grandmother's spirit in her hands, could hear her laugh in the syncopated rhythms, could sense her approval in the way the music seemed to play itself. As the last note faded into silence, Amelia kept her hands on the keys, unwilling to break the spell. Then the applause began, not polite concert applause, but a roar of appreciation that seemed to shake the building. She stood and turned to face the audience, seeing them on their feet, a standing ovation that went on and on. Through the lights, she could make out faces, Dr. Chun in the front row, tears streaming down his face. Charlotte and her classmates in the balcony cheering like they were at a rock concert. Victoria Sterling standing with the rest, her expression unreadable, but her presence a statement in itself. Maestro Chen gestured for Amelia to take another bow, then another. The orchestra was applauding too, the violinists tapping their bows against their music stands, in the traditional show of respect from musicians to musician. But the evening wasn't over. After a brief intermission, it was time for Betty's violin concerto, with the Philharmonic's principal violinist as soloist, and Amelia returning to play the piano reduction of the orchestral parts, a special arrangement created just for this performance. This was Betty's music, pure and unfiltered, complex, beautiful, challenging, and ultimately transcendent. The violin sang, soared, wept, and celebrated, carrying 35 years of silence into sound. Amelia supported from the piano, feeling like she was playing alongside her grandmother, their hands moving in synchrony across time. The slow movement was almost unbearably beautiful, a melody that seemed to contain all the love Betty had poured into her granddaughter, all the dreams she'd had to defer, all the beauty she'd created, despite the barriers placed before her. The principal violinist played with tears rolling down her cheeks, the emotion raw and honest. The finale was pure celebration, fast, joyous, technically brilliant, and utterly Betty. It was the sound of barriers breaking, of voices finally being heard, of truth triumphant. As the last notes rang out, the audience leaped to their feet again, the applause immediate and overwhelming. Maestro Chen called Amelia back to the stage for curtain calls. As she stood there holding hands with the violinist and the conductor, while the orchestra and audience applauded, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about honoring the past anymore. It was about claiming the future. After what felt like a dozen curtain calls, Amelia was finally allowed to leave the stage. The backstage area was chaos, flowers, congratulations, reporters wanting statements. But Dr. Chun was there, creating a protective barrier, guiding her through the crowd. "You did it," he said simply. "You gave Betty her voice back." "We did it," Amelia corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Tante." As they made their way to the reception, Amelia was stopped by a distinguished-looking black woman she didn't recognize. "Ms. Washington, I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, the new director of the Philharmonic's Youth Education Program. I wanted to talk to you about something." "Tonight, Dr." Chun interjected protectively. "Perhaps this could wait." "No, it's fine," Amelia said. "What is it?" "We're launching a new initiative, the Betty Washington Memorial Scholarship. Full funding for talented young musicians from underserved communities to study with Philharmonic musicians. We'd like you to be our first artist ambassador to help us identify and mentor these students." Amelia felt her throat tighten. Grandma would have loved that. "We think so too. We can't undo the past, but we can make sure future Betty Washingtons get the opportunities they deserve." The reception was a blur of congratulations and conversations. Charlotte appeared with a glass of sparkling cider for Amelia. "My mother wants to talk to you," she said. "But I told her to wait. Tonight is yours." "It's okay," Amelia said. "I already talked to her." Charlotte's eyebrows shot up. "When?" "She came to the apartment a few days ago to apologize, and maybe to start becoming the person she could have been all along." "I don't believe it," Charlotte said flatly. "People can change, Charlotte. Sometimes they just need to see themselves clearly first. Your mother saw herself that night at the gala, and she didn't like what she saw. That's the first step." As the evening wound down, Sarah Chen approached with her camera operator. "I have enough footage for 3 documentaries," she laughed. "But seriously, tonight was magical. You didn't just perform music, you changed the conversation about who gets to participate in classical music." "I just played the piano," Amelia said modestly. "No," Sarah said firmly. "You stood up and demanded to be heard. You refused to let poverty or prejudice silence you. That's going to inspire thousands of kids who think classical music isn't for them." As Amelia and Dr. Chun finally left the concert hall, the city lights sparkled around them. The same streets that had seemed so hostile 7 months ago now felt full of possibility. "What now?" Dr. Chun asked as they walked. "You've accomplished so much already." "Now I keep learning," Amelia said. "I finish school, I study with you, I compete, I compose. I honor Grandma by becoming the musician she always knew I could be. And the Betty Washington Scholarship. I help other kids find their voices. Because Grandma was right, music is meant to be shared. Every child with talent deserves the chance to develop it. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the city creating its own kind of music around them. As they reached the brownstone, Amelia paused on the steps. Dr. Chun, that first night when you offered to help me, why did you really do it? He considered the question carefully. Because I saw myself in you. But more than that, I saw what music could be if we stopped gatekeeping it. You represented possibility, not just for yourself, but for the future of classical music. It needs voices like yours, stories like yours, truth like yours. And now you're family, he said simply. The daughter I never had, the student every teacher dreams of, the future of music, walking around in teenage form. As they entered the apartment, Amelia went straight to the Bosendorfer and sat down. She needed to play, not for an audience, not for practice, but for herself. Her fingers found the keys and began to improvise, creating something new, something that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. This was what Grandma Betty had given her, not just technique or repertoire, but the ability to create, to speak through music, to add her voice to the great conversation that had been going on for centuries. And now, thanks to everything that had happened since that desperate night at the Sterling Gala, that voice would be heard. The music filled the apartment, spilling out through open windows into the New York night. Somewhere, perhaps another young musician heard it and thought, maybe I could do that too. And that Amelia thought as she played was how change really happened. One voice inspiring another, creating a chorus that couldn't be silenced. The spring showcase at Branson was still 2 weeks away, and Amelia had one more performance to prepare. But tonight, she just played for the joy of it, for the grandmother who'd taught her, for the teacher who'd saved her, for the future that stretched ahead, bright with possibility. The morning after the Philharmonic performance, Amelia woke to find her phone flooded with messages. The New York Times had published a glowing review with the headline, "A Washington Returns to the Philharmonic Triumphant." But it was a text from Charlotte that caught her attention. Check your email now. Still groggy, Amelia opened her laptop to find an email from the Juilliard School. Her hands trembled as she read it aloud to Dr. Chun, who had appeared in her doorway with coffee. Dear Ms. Washington, the faculty of the Juilliard School was present at last night's performance at David Geffen Hall. We were profoundly moved by both your performance and your compositions. We would like to extend an invitation for you to audition for our pre-college division, with the possibility of a full scholarship should you meet our requirements. More importantly, we would like to discuss commissioning a full performance of Betty's Suite with our student orchestra. Juilliard, Dr. Chun said softly. Your grandmother always dreamed of that for you. But I'm only 13, Amelia protested, and I'm still catching up academically at Branson. Age is irrelevant when talent is undeniable, Dr. Chun replied. But this is your decision. You don't have to take every opportunity that comes your way. Before Amelia could respond, the doorbell rang. Dr. Chun answered it and returned with an unexpected visitor, Maestro Chen, from the Philharmonic. I apologize for coming unannounced, the conductor said, but I had to speak with you immediately. Last night after the performance, I received a call from the International Tchaikovsky Competition Committee. Amelia's breath caught. The Tchaikovsky competition was one of the most prestigious in the world, held every 4 years in Moscow. They want to invite you to compete in the junior division, Maestro Chen continued. You would be the youngest competitor they've ever had, but after seeing footage of last night's performance, they're willing to make an exception. Moscow, Amelia whispered. But that's impossible. I've only been studying seriously for 6 months. You've been studying your entire life, Dr. Chun corrected gently. The last 6 months were just polish on a diamond that was already there. Maestro Chen pulled out an official-looking envelope. The competition is in 3 months. If you accept, the Philharmonic would sponsor your trip, and I would personally help prepare you. This could change everything, Amelia. A win at the Tchaikovsky competition would open every door in the classical music world. And if I lose, then you'll have competed against the best young musicians in the world and learned from the experience, Maestro Chen said. But frankly, after what I saw last night, I don't think losing is in your vocabulary. After Maestro Chen left, Amelia sat at the Bosendorfer, her mind spinning. 6 months ago, she'd been homeless, playing in churches when she could sneak in. Now Juilliard wanted her, the Tchaikovsky competition was calling, and her grandmother's music was finally being heard. It felt surreal, like she might wake up at any moment back in the shelter. It's overwhelming, Dr. Chun said, reading her expression. But remember, you don't have to decide everything today. Take time to think about what you really want. That afternoon at Branson, the entire school seemed to know about the review and the opportunities flooding in. Ms. Rodriguez practically glowed with pride during composition class. I want you all to understand what Amelia has accomplished, she told the class. She didn't just perform well, she changed the narrative about who belongs in classical music. That's the power of authentic artistry. After class, a younger student Amelia didn't recognize approached nervously. She was maybe 10, with worn clothes and careful eyes that reminded Amelia painfully of herself not so long ago. "Excuse me," the girl said quietly. "Are you really Amelia Washington?" "I am." "I'm Maya. I'm here on scholarship too. I play violin, but—" She paused, looking down. "Some kids say I don't belong here because I'm from the Bronx and my mom cleans houses." Amelia knelt down to Maya's level. "Do you love music? More than anything? Can you play? My teacher says I'm gifted, but—" "No buts," Amelia interrupted gently. "If you can play and you love music, then you belong anywhere music is being made. Don't let anyone tell you different. What's your favorite piece?" "Bach's Partita No. 2 in D minor," Maya said, her eyes lighting up. "The Chaconne. It's too hard for me now, but someday—" "I'd like to hear you play sometime," Amelia said. "Maybe we could work on some pieces together." Maya's face transformed with joy. "Really? You'd do that? Music is meant to be shared," Amelia said, echoing her grandmother. "How about Saturday mornings? Dr. Chun won't mind if we use his apartment." As Maya ran off excitedly, Charlotte appeared beside Amelia. "You know, you just became her hero, right?" "I'm nobody's hero. I'm just someone who got lucky." "No," Charlotte said firmly. "Lucky is being born into money like I was. What you have is talent combined with more determination than anyone I've ever met. That's not luck, that's earned." That evening, Sarah Chen came by the apartment to show them the final cut of the documentary. It was even more powerful than the rough version, intercutting Amelia's story with statistics about arts education, inequality, and interviews with other talented kids who'd been denied opportunities. "Netflix wants to release it next week," Sarah said, "right after the Branson showcase. They think the timing is perfect. It'll ride the wave of attention from your Philharmonic performance." "Will it help other kids?" Amelia asked. "It already has. The Sterling Foundation, Victoria's organization, has already received millions in pledges for music education programs. Whatever her motivations, your story has inspired people to act." Dr. Chun had been quiet during the screening, but now he spoke up. "There's something else to consider. This level of attention, it can be overwhelming. You're 13 years old, Amelia. You should have time to be a teenager, to make mistakes, to grow, without the world watching." "But if the world watching means other kids get opportunities," Amelia said slowly, "isn't that worth it?" That's a very mature perspective, Sarah said. But Dr. Chun has a point. Fame at a young age can be complicated. I don't want fame, Amelia said firmly. I want to play music and help other kids access music. If fame is a side effect, I'll deal with it. The next days blurred together in a whirlwind of preparation for the Branson showcase. Amelia's piano concerto was the centerpiece of the program, and the pressure was immense. Every student at Branson was talented, but the buzz around Amelia's composition had created expectations that felt impossible to meet. During a rehearsal with the student orchestra, things went wrong. The second movement's tempo kept falling apart, and the student conductor, a senior named Marcus, who usually radiated confidence, was getting frustrated. "It's too complex," he finally said, throwing down his baton. "The rhythm changes are impossible to follow." "They're not impossible," Amelia said, trying to stay calm. "They're just different. Here, let me show you." She moved to the podium, something a composer almost never did during student rehearsals. Think of it like a conversation. The piano asks a question, the strings answer, the winds comment. It's not about counting beats, it's about listening to each other. She began to conduct, humming the different parts to demonstrate how they fit together. Gradually, the orchestra began to understand. The passage that had seemed impossible suddenly made sense. "How do you know how to conduct?" Marcus asked, impressed despite himself. "My grandmother taught me. She said a good musician should understand every part of music making, not just their instrument." The rehearsal continued more smoothly after that, but Amelia could feel the weight of expectations. Everyone wanted her to be perfect, to live up to the story that was building around her. But she was still just 13, still learning, still making mistakes. That night she confessed her fears to Dr. Chun. "What if I can't do it? What if the concerto fails and everyone realizes I'm just a kid who got lucky?" "Then you'll learn from it and write a better concerto next time," he said simply. "Failure isn't the end of the world, Amelia. It's just another teacher." "But everyone's watching now. The documentary, the news stories. If I fail, it's not just me who loses. It's every kid people might give a chance to because of my story." Dr. Chun sat beside her on the piano bench. "That's too much weight for anyone to carry, especially someone your age. You're not responsible for fixing the entire classical music world. You're responsible for being true to your music and yourself. The rest will follow or it won't, but you can't control that." The day of the Branson showcase arrived with unseasonable heat, the May afternoon feeling more like July. The school's concert hall was packed beyond capacity, with people standing in the aisles, despite fire code violations. The audience wasn't just parents and students anymore. There were critics, talent scouts. Even some celebrities Sarah Chen had mentioned were interested in the documentary. Backstage, Maya found Amelia warming up. "I'm scared for you," the younger girl admitted. "I'm scared for me too," Amelia confessed. "But you know what my grandmother used to say. Fear means you're about to do something that matters. Will you be okay if something goes wrong?" Amelia thought about it. "I survived being homeless. I survived losing the person I loved most. I can survive a bad performance." But as she walked onto the stage to perform her concerto, Amelia felt a strange calm descend. The audience faded away, and she was back in her grandmother's apartment. Tiny fingers on worn keys, Betty's voice guiding her. "Music isn't about perfection, baby girl. It's about connection." The first movement began with the orchestra stating the main theme, a melody that had come to Amelia during one particularly cold night in a shelter when music was the only warm thing she had. She entered on the piano, weaving around the orchestral texture, sometimes supporting, sometimes soaring above, always in conversation. The development section was technically demanding, requiring rapid passages that tested the limits of her still-growing hands. But Dr. Chun had helped her find fingerings that worked, and the notes flew from her fingers like birds taking flight. The student orchestra, inspired by her confidence, played better than they ever had in rehearsal. The second movement, the one that had given them so much trouble, began tentatively, but Amelia had learned something from conducting the rehearsal. She played with exaggerated physical cues, her body language helping the orchestra stay together. Marcus, conducting from the podium, picked up on this and began mirroring her movements. It became a three-way conversation, composer, conductor, and orchestra finding unity in the music. This movement was Amelia's favorite, full of the blues harmonies. Grandma Betty had loved classical in structure, but American in soul. She could feel the audience leaning in, captured by the unexpected harmonies and rhythmic complexity that somehow felt inevitable rather than forced. The third movement was pure joy, fast, brilliant, celebratory. It was the sound of freedom, of possibilities opening, of a young girl discovering she could fly. The orchestra struggled to keep up with some of the tempo changes, but Amelia adjusted in real time, her grandmother's training in ensemble, playing serving her well. As she approached the cadenza, the solo section, where the orchestra drops out and the pianist plays alone, Amelia made a spontaneous decision. Instead of playing what she'd written, she improvised, incorporating fragments of Betty's compositions, melodies from the Shelter days, even a hint of the Chopin she'd played at the Sterling Gala. It was risky improvising during a formal performance, but it felt right. The orchestra re-entered perfectly, Marcus somehow anticipating where she would lead them. The final section built to a climax that had the entire hall holding its breath, then released into a coda that was both ending and beginning, closure and possibility. The last chord rang out, and for a moment there was silence. Then the audience erupted. The standing ovation was immediate and unanimous. Amelia could see Dr. Chun in the front row, tears streaming down his face. Victoria Sterling was there too, applauding with what looked like genuine appreciation. Even the critics were on their feet. But what touched Amelia most was seeing Maya in the wings jumping up and down with excitement, and the student orchestra members tapping their stands with their bows, the ultimate sign of respect from musician to musician. Ms. Rodriguez joined her on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a performance, but a composition that redefines what student work can be. Amelia Washington has created something that belongs in the professional repertoire." After multiple bows, Amelia was finally allowed to leave the stage. The green room was chaos, flowers, people wanting to congratulate her, reporters seeking quotes. But she pushed through them all to find Maya. "That was amazing," the younger girl exclaimed. "The part where you improvised, I could tell because your face changed. It was like you were channeling something." "I was channeling my grandmother," Amelia said, "and everyone who helped me get here." Charlotte appeared with her mother. Victoria Sterling looked different, somehow less sharp, more vulnerable. "That was remarkable," Victoria said simply. "The composition, the performance, but more than that, the generosity of spirit. You could have written something to show off your technique. Instead, you wrote something that showcased the entire orchestra." "Music is collaboration," Amelia replied. "Even solo music is a collaboration between composer and performer, between past and present." "You've taught me a great deal," Victoria said quietly. "I wanted you to know that the Sterling Foundation is establishing a program specifically for young composers from underserved communities. We're calling it the Betty Washington Composition Fellowship. I hope that's acceptable." Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. Grandma would have loved that. As the crowd finally thinned, Dr. Chun found her. "There's someone here who wants to meet you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner where an elderly woman sat in a wheelchair attended by a nurse. "Amelia," Dr. Chun said softly, "this is Maria Rodriguez, my teacher's sister." The old woman's eyes were bright with tears. "My sister would have been so proud," she said, her voice heavily accented but clear. "She always said music would find a way to continue to grow, to reach across all barriers. You are proof she was right." "Your sister saved Dr. Chun," Amelia said. "And Dr. Chun saved me. It's all connected, isn't it?" "Everything is connected through music," Maria agreed. "The past, present, future, all joined by these invisible threads of melody and harmony." That evening, as the apartment settled into quiet, Amelia sat at the Bosendorfer processing everything that had happened. The Juilliard audition was next week. The Tchaikovsky competition loomed. The documentary would soon make her story public, on a scale she couldn't quite fathom. "Overwhelmed?" Dr. Chun asked, joining her. "Grateful," Amelia corrected. "Scared, excited, worried, hopeful, but mostly grateful. Your grandmother would be proud." "I think she is proud," Amelia said. "I can feel her sometimes when I play. Not like a ghost or anything supernatural. Just a presence. A reminder that music transcends death, that what we create outlasts us." The next morning brought more news. The video of her showcase performance had gone viral overnight, not just in classical music circles, but mainstream social media. Old Betty's granddaughter was trending. The combination of the performance quality and the story behind it had captured something in the public imagination. "This changes things," Sarah Chen said over the phone. "Netflix wants to move the documentary release up. They think we've caught lightning in a bottle." But Amelia was focused on something else. Maya had sent her a video of herself playing a Bach invention, asking for feedback. 3 other scholarship students from Branson had reached out wanting to form a composers collective. The Betty Washington Composition Fellowship had already received its first applications. "This is what matters," she told Dr. Chun, showing him the messages. "Not the fame or the competitions. This kid's finding their voices, sharing their music." The Juilliard audition came faster than expected. Amelia walked into the famous building trying not to be intimidated by its history, by all the legends who had studied there. The audition panel was formidable, 5 of the most respected musicians in the world, sitting behind a long table with inscrutable expressions. "We've seen your performances online," the head of the panel said. "Today we want to see something different. Can you sight read?" They placed a piece she'd never seen before on the piano, a contemporary composition, full of unusual rhythms and extended techniques. Amelia studied it for the allowed minute, hearing it in her head, then began to play. It wasn't perfect, she missed a few notes, had to adjust some fingerings on the fly, but she captured the essence of the piece, its mood and meaning. "Now," another panelist said, "can you play something that shows us who you are, not as Betty Washington's granddaughter, not as the girl from the viral video, but as Amelia?" Without hesitation, Amelia began to improvise. She started with a simple melody, something that had been floating in her head since that morning, then developed, it complicated, it simplified it again. She incorporated techniques Dr. Chun had taught her, harmonies her grandmother had loved, rhythms from the streets she'd survived. It was her entire journey in sound. When she finished, the panel was silent for a long moment. Then the head of the panel did something unexpected. He smiled. "Welcome to Juilliard, Ms. Washington. We'll work out the details of schedule and scholarship, but we want you here." Walking out of Juilliard, Amelia felt a strange mix of triumph and trepidation. Every door was opening, but each one led to more challenges, more pressure, more responsibility. Her phone buzzed with a text from Charlotte. My mother just announced she's stepping down from running the Sterling Foundation to focus on direct service. She's actually going to teach music in public schools. You broke her, but maybe in a good way. That evening, Amelia found Dr. Chun in his study looking at old photos. One showed him as a young man with Mrs. Rodriguez, both at a piano, both smiling. She would have loved you, he said. She always said music was meant to be passed forward each generation, lifting the next higher. Like Grandma did for me, like you're doing now, and like you're already doing for Maya and the others. He closed the photo album. I have something to tell you. Maestro Chen called. The Tchaikovsky Competition Committee has made an unusual decision. They want to feature you in a special exhibition performance regardless of the competition results. They say your story, our story, really represents something important about the future of classical music. Our story. A Korean boy, taught by a Puerto Rican woman, teaching a black girl who was taught by her grandmother, who should have been concertmaster. It's the real American story, isn't it? All these threads weaving together into something beautiful. That night, Amelia couldn't sleep. She stood at her window looking out at the city lights, thinking about all the young musicians out there who might never get the chances she'd been given. The weight of representing them felt enormous, but also energizing. She went to the piano and began to write not a performance piece, but something simpler. A teaching piece for Maya, something that would challenge her while building her confidence. As she wrote, she thought about Grandma Betty creating exercises specifically for her small hands, always meeting her where she was, while pushing her toward where she could be strong. By dawn, she'd completed not just one piece, but the beginning of a whole series from student to student exercises in musical conversation. Each piece would be dedicated to one of the young musicians she was mentoring, designed for their specific needs and abilities. You're teaching now, Dr. Chun observed, finding her asleep at the piano, with manuscript pages scattered around her. I'm learning by teaching, Amelia corrected, rubbing her eyes. Every time I help Maya or the others, I understand something new about music, about how it connects us. And the documentary released that Friday, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Music for All began trending. School districts that had cut music programs faced renewed pressure to restore them. Private donors stepped forward with millions in funding. The Betty Washington Composition Fellowship received hundreds of applications in the first day. But there was backlash too. Some critics called it poverty porn, exploiting Amelia's story for entertainment. Others questioned whether she was truly talented or just a symbol, a convenient narrative for liberals to rally around. They're using you up, one particularly nasty blog post read. You're not a musician. You're a mascot for white guilt. Amelia read it once, then closed her laptop. They don't understand, she told Dr. Chun. I'm not playing for them. I'm playing for every kid who's been told they don't belong in certain spaces. If being a symbol helps even one of those kids access music education, then I'll be a symbol. Wow. The Saturday morning session with Maya had grown. Now 5 young musicians gathered in Dr. Chun's apartment, all from similar backgrounds, all hungry to learn. Amelia worked with each of them individually, while the others practiced or composed. Why do you do this? Maya asked during a break. You could be practicing for the Tchaikovsky competition. This is practicing, Amelia replied. Every time I teach you something, I understand it better myself. Plus, Grandma always said music was meant to be shared. What's the point of having knowledge if you don't pass it on? One of the other students, a cellist named Jerome, was struggling with a Bach suite. I can play the notes, he said frustratedly, but it doesn't sound like music. Amelia sat beside him. Tell me about your day yesterday. What why? Just tell me. Jerome described his day school, his part-time job taking care of his younger siblings, while his mom worked her second shift. Now play the prelude again, Amelia said. But this time think about that moment when your mom finally came home and you could stop being the adult. That relief, that release, put that in the music. Jerome played again, and this time the notes sang with emotion. The mechanical precision was replaced by something human, something true. How did you know? He asked. Because music is about life, Amelia said. Grandma taught me that. The notes are just the vocabulary. The music is what you say with them. The weeks leading to the Tchaikovsky competition passed in a blur of intensive preparation. Dr. Chun had structured Amelia's days with military precision: 4 hours of practice in the morning, 2 hours of score study, physical exercise to prevent injury, then more practice in the evening. But Amelia insisted on keeping her Saturday sessions with the young musicians, despite Dr. Chun's concerns about overextension. You need to focus, he said one evening after a particularly grueling practice session. Moscow is only 6 weeks away. This is part of my focus, Amelia replied, massaging her aching hands. Teaching them keeps me grounded. It reminds me why I'm doing this. The next morning brought unexpected news. Victoria Sterling stood at their door, but not the polished socialite they knew. This Victoria wore simple clothes, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a basic ponytail, and her hands, Amelia noticed with shock, had chalk dust on them. I've been teaching, Victoria said, seeming to read Amelia's surprise. Public school in the Bronx, 4th graders. They're impossible and wonderful, and they've taught me more in 3 weeks than I learned in 40 years of charity galas. Dr. Chun invited her in, though his expression remained guarded. Victoria sat at the kitchen table looking unusually vulnerable. I came to ask a favor, she said, addressing Amelia directly. There's a girl in my class, Keisha. She's brilliant musical, but she's never had any formal training. She heard about your Saturday sessions from Maya's older brother. Could she join? Of course, Amelia said immediately. Bring her this Saturday. Victoria hesitated. There's something else. Her family is facing eviction. Her mother works 3 jobs, but it's not enough. I've been trying to help, but... She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable discussing her limitations. The Sterling Foundation, Dr. Chun began, has bylaws and boards and processes, Victoria interrupted bitterly. By the time we could approve emergency funding, they'll be on the streets. She looked at Amelia. You understand what that means better than anyone. Amelia thought about those terrifying nights in shelters, the constant fear, the way hunger made everything else impossible to think about. What does she need? $3,000 for back rent. I can cover going forward, but I've already maxed out what I can do personally without my husband noticing and causing problems. Without hesitation, Amelia went to her room and returned with an envelope, the fee from a recent performance at a private event. This is $4,000. Make sure they have food, too. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I can't take your money. You're not taking it. I'm investing it in Keisha's future. That's what people did for me. Amelia pushed the envelope across the table. But Victoria, this can't be a one-time thing. If you're really changing, if you really want to help, you need to change the Sterling Foundation from the inside. I'm trying, but these institutions, they move slowly. Then move faster, Amelia said firmly. You have power. Use it. After Victoria left, Dr. Chun looked at Amelia with a mixture of pride and concern. That was most of your savings. It was Keisha's rent, Amelia corrected. Besides, after Moscow, there will be more opportunities to earn. But Keisha might not get another chance if she ends up on the streets. That Saturday, Victoria arrived with Keisha, a tiny girl with enormous eyes, and hands that seemed too large for her body. Piano hands, Grandma Betty would have called them. Keisha was painfully shy at first, barely speaking above a whisper. "What do you like to listen to?" Amelia asked gently. "Everything," Keisha whispered. "But especially the music from church. And there's this thing my neighbor plays. Classical, but with drums. Bernstein," Amelia guessed. "Copeland." "Show me what you mean." Keisha approached the piano tentatively, then played a few notes, not a melody exactly, but a harmonic progression that was surprisingly sophisticated. "You hear harmonies?" Amelia said excitedly. "Not everyone does. Can you play what you hear in your head?" For the next hour, Amelia worked with Keisha on basics, hand position, note-reading scales, but also encouraged her to play what she heard internally. The other students gathered around, offering encouragement. Maya especially took Keisha under her wing, remembering her own first terrifying session. "She's gifted," Amelia told Victoria quietly. "Really gifted, with proper training." "I'll make sure she gets it," Victoria promised. "Whatever it takes." As the sessions continued over the following weeks, Amelia noticed Victoria changing. She stayed for the entire 2 hours, sitting quietly in the corner, occasionally helping with theory worksheets or turning pages. The sharp edges that had defined her were softening, replaced by something more genuine. One afternoon, Charlotte arrived during a session. "I had to see this for myself," she said, watching her mother help Jerome with fingering. "Who is that woman? And what did she do with Victoria Sterling?" "People change," Amelia said simply. "Sometimes they just need permission." The Moscow departure date approached rapidly. Amelia's repertoire was set: Bach's Goldberg Variations, Chopin's Fourth Ballade, Prokofiev's Seventh Sonata, and a contemporary piece by a living composer. But it was her own composition required for the final round that consumed her thoughts. "It needs to be perfect," she told Dr. Chun during a late-night practice session. "It needs to be yours," he corrected. "Perfect is boring. Truth is compelling." 3 nights before departure, Sarah Chen came by with news. "The documentary has been nominated for an Emmy. Also, there's been an offer from 60 Minutes. They want to follow you to Moscow." "No," Amelia said immediately. "Moscow is about music, not media. But the exposure would make it about everything except music. I'm 13 years old, competing against people who've been training since they were 3. I need to focus." Sarah nodded, respecting the decision. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. But Amelia, you should know your story has already changed things. Music programs are being restored in dozens of schools. The Betty Washington Foundation has raised millions. Kids who never thought classical music was for them are picking up instruments. That's Grandma's victory, not mine." "It's both," Sarah said firmly. "You're carrying her torch, but you're also lighting new ones." The night before departure, Amelia couldn't sleep. She found Dr. Chun at the Bosendorfer, playing something she didn't recognize. "What is that?" she asked. "Something my teacher wrote for me before my first major competition. She called it Courage Song." He moved over, making room for her on the bench. "Play it with me." They played together, 4 hands on one piano, the melody passing between them like a conversation. It was simple but beautiful, full of hope and determination. "I'm scared," Amelia admitted when they finished. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. But remember, you've already won the only competition that matters." "What's that?" "The one against silence. Your grandmother's music is being heard. Your own voice has emerged. Everything else is just extra." The flight to Moscow felt endless. Amelia tried to practice fingerings on her tray table, but turbulence made it impossible. Instead, she studied her scores, hearing the music in her head, visualizing every passage. Maestro Chen, who had joined them as part of the official delegation, sat across the aisle. "You know, the first time I competed internationally, I threw up right before going on stage." "That's not helping," Amelia said weakly. "I still won," he continued with a smile. "Sometimes our bodies know how important something is before our minds catch up." Moscow was a shock of cold and grandeur. The competition venue, the Great Hall of the Moscow Conservatory, was intimidating in its perfection. During registration, Amelia saw her competitors, young people from around the world, all with the focused intensity of those who dedicated their lives to this moment. "Amelia Washington!" a voice called out. She turned to find a tall boy, maybe 17, with startling blue eyes. "I'm Dmitry Volkov. I saw your Philharmonic performance online. Your composition was brilliant." "Thank you," Amelia said, surprised by his friendliness. "Weren't they supposed to be rivals?" "We're all competitors here," Dmitry said, seeming to read her thoughts. "But we're also all musicians. Music is bigger than competition." Over the next days, as preliminary rounds began, Amelia found unexpected camaraderie among the competitors. They shared practice rooms, offered advice, celebrated each other's successes. It was nothing like the cutthroat atmosphere she'd expected. Her first round performance was solid, but not spectacular. The Goldberg variations required a maturity she was still developing, and she could feel the judges noting every slight imperfection. But when she walked off stage, Dmitry was waiting. "The way you played the 13th variation, I've never heard it like that. So much joy. But I rushed the 25th. So you made Bach sound like a living person instead of a museum piece. That's worth a dozen perfect variations." The second round went better. Chopin was in her blood. Grandma Betty had made sure of that. The fourth ballade flowed from her fingers like water, all its passion and pain feeling personally relevant. She thought of her grandmother as she played, of loss and love intertwined, and when she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence before the applause began. "Now that," one of the judges said loudly enough to be heard, "was music." Between rounds, Moscow revealed itself to her in small doses. Dr. Chun took her to see the Kremlin, to walk along the Moscow River, to visit the Tchaikovsky Museum. But most evenings were spent in practice rooms preparing for the next challenge. News from home came through video calls. Maya had written her first composition. Jerome had been accepted to a summer program at Tanglewood. Keisha was thriving, her natural ability blooming under proper instruction. "You started something," Charlotte told her during one call. "My mother is a completely different person. She actually smiled at a board meeting yesterday while talking about expanding access programs." She smiled, Amelia. Victoria Sterling doesn't smile. The semifinals arrived with Prokofiev's Seventh Sonata, a piece of controlled violence and unexpected beauty. Amelia had struggled with it initially, finding its harsh dissonances difficult to love. But Dr. Chun had helped her understand it as a war piece written during the siege of Stalingrad, full of rage and defiance and the determination to survive. As she played it in the Great Hall, she thought not of war, but of her own battles against poverty, against prejudice, against the voice that sometimes still whispered she didn't belong here. The music became her declaration of existence, her refusal to be silenced. When she finished, her hands were shaking, and her heart was pounding. The audience erupted, not polite classical music applause, but something raw, more visceral. Even the judges looked affected. "You made it to the finals," Dr. Chun told her that evening, his voice thick with emotion. "Youngest finalist in the competition's history." There were 6 finalists. Besides Amelia and Dmitri, there was Liu Wei from China, Anna Pedersen from Denmark, Carlos Mendoza from Argentina, and Yuki Tanaka from Japan. Each was brilliant in their own way, and any of them deserved to win. The final round required 2 performances, the contemporary piece and their own composition. Amelia had chosen a work by Jennifer Higdon, an American composer, whose music spoke to her in ways she was still discovering. The piece was technically murderous, but emotionally accessible, full of the kind of American optimism that felt authentic to her. As she waited backstage for her turn, Dmitri found her. "Whatever happens today, you've already changed things. A 13-year-old Black American girl in the Tchaikovsky finals. You've broken barriers just by being here." "I don't want to be a symbol," Amelia said. "I just want to play music." "Too late," Dmitri said with a kind smile. "You're both now. The question is what you do with it." When her turn came, Amelia walked onto the stage to find it transformed. A full orchestra waited for the final round. Competitors performed with the Moscow Philharmonic. The conductor, a severe-looking woman named Natasha Petrova, nodded at her with what might have been approval. The Higdon piece began with solo piano crystalline notes that seemed to hang in the air. Then the orchestra entered, and Amelia had to fight to maintain her voice against their power. But she'd learned from her Philharmonic performance how to be part of an ensemble while still being herself. The piece built to moments of incredible complexity, her hands moving in different rhythms, different worlds almost. But she never lost the thread of the music's meaning. This was about American spaces, vast and full of possibility. She played it like she was painting the Grand Canyon, the Great Plains, the streets of New York, where she'd found both desperation and salvation. The audience response was enthusiastic, but Amelia barely heard it. She had one more performance, her own composition, the piece that would determine everything. She'd titled it Inheritance, a 3-movement work for piano and orchestra that told the story of what passes between generations. The first movement was Grandma Betty's story, full of classical beauty, constrained by the limitations placed on her. The second was Amelia's own journey from loss through homelessness to discovery. The third was the future, not just her future, but the future of all the young musicians she taught, all the voices that would come after. As she began to play, Amelia felt a strange calm descend. This wasn't about competition anymore. This was about truth-telling, about honoring the past while claiming the future. The orchestra, well rehearsed despite limited time, seemed to understand the music's importance. They played with commitment that went beyond professional obligation. The first movement made some audience members shift uncomfortably. It was beautiful but constrained melodies that wanted to soar, but were held back by harmonies that wouldn't quite let them. It was the sound of talent, denied of voices, silenced of dreams deferred. The second movement was where Amelia poured her whole heart out. The piano part became almost violently emotional, hands crossing in impossible reaches, dynamics that went from whispers to shouts without warning. This was the chaos of loss, the fear of the streets, but also the determination to survive. The orchestra provided sometimes support, sometimes obstacle, representing a world that didn't know whether to help or hinder. But it was the third movement that brought people to tears. It began simply a melody that Maya had written in one of their sessions, transformed and developed. Then Jerome's rhythmic patterns appeared in the strings. Keisha's harmonic progressions colored the winds. Each young musician Amelia taught had contributed something, their voices woven into the texture. The music built to a climax that was both ending and beginning, the orchestra and piano finally in perfect harmony, playing a theme that combined Grandma Betty's beloved blues with classical fugue techniques. It was the sound of barriers breaking, of voices joining, of music returning to its true purpose, connection. As the final chord rang out a surprising major resolution to what had been ambiguous harmony, Amelia kept her hands on the keys, unwilling to break the spell. The silence that followed felt sacred, as if the entire hall was holding its breath. Then the applause began, and it was deafening. The orchestra members were applauding too, some standing, the ultimate sign of respect. Conductor Petrova, who supposedly never smiled, was beaming. In the audience, Amelia could see Dr. Chun wiping tears from his eyes, Maestro Chen standing and applauding with his whole body. But it was a figure in the back that caught her attention. James Patterson, the elderly bassist who'd known Grandma Betty, had somehow made it to Moscow. He was standing with the help of his cane, his face wet with tears, his free hand over his heart. The judges deliberated for 3 hours while the competitors waited backstage. Dmitri paced nervously while Liu Wei meditated in a corner. Anna and Carlos played cards to pass the time. Yuki worked on a crossword puzzle in Russian, Japanese, and English simultaneously. Amelia sat at a practice piano playing scales to keep her hands busy. She thought about Grandma Betty, about what she would say at this moment. "You already won, baby girl. You told your truth. Everything else is gravy." When they were finally called back to the stage, Amelia felt strangely calm. She stood between Dmitri and Liu Wei, holding hands with both, as was tradition. Whatever happened, she'd done what she came to do. The head judge, a legendary pianist named Vladimir Ashkenazy, stepped forward. "This has been an exceptional competition. Each finalist brought something unique, something necessary to the future of classical music. But there was one performance tonight that transcended competition, that reminded us why we make music in the first place." He paused, the entire hall holding its breath. "The gold medal goes to Amelia Washington for a composition that doesn't just honor the past, but imagines a more inclusive future for classical music." The hall erupted. Dmitri hugged her immediately, lifting her off her feet. Liu Wei was applauding with genuine joy. Even the other competitors, who had every right to be disappointed, seemed moved by the moment. As Amelia accepted the medal, she thought about that night at the Sterling Gala, how far she'd come from the desperate child asking to play for food. But in another way, she was still that same girl, someone who believed music could bridge any gap, heal any wound, connect any distance. "I want to thank my grandmother, Betty Washington," she said when the applause finally died down enough for her to speak. "She gave me music when she had nothing else to give. I want to thank Dr. Robert Chun, who saw me when I was invisible. And I want to thank every young musician who reminds me daily that music belongs to everyone." She held up the medal. "This isn't mine alone. It belongs to every child who's been told they don't belong in classical music, to every teacher fighting to keep music programs alive, to every parent working multiple jobs so their child can have lessons. Your voices matter. Your music matters. And this is just the beginning." The response was overwhelming, more applause, more tears, more recognition that something significant had shifted in the classical music world. But Amelia was already thinking ahead, to the young musicians waiting for her back home, to the compositions she wanted to write, to the barriers still waiting to be broken. That night at the celebration dinner, Dmitri found her on a balcony overlooking Red Square. "You know, everything changes now," he said. "Concert requests, recording contracts, pressure to be perfect all the time." "I know," Amelia said, "but I also know who I am. I'm Betty Washington's granddaughter. I'm Dr. Chun's student. I'm Maya and Keisha and Jerome's teacher. Everything else is just noise." "You really believe that?" "I have to. The moment I start believing the hype is the moment I lose everything my grandmother taught me about music being service, not spotlight. Back in the hotel, Amelia video called home. The young musicians had gathered at Dr. Chun's apartment to watch the live stream. They were all talking at once, excitement making them forget their usual shyness. "You did it!" Maya screamed. "Maya, you showed them all." "We did it," Amelia corrected. "Your melody is in that piece, Maya. Jerome, your rhythms. Keisha, your harmonies. We all won tonight." Victoria Sterling appeared in the frame, still looking slightly out of place among the children, but trying. "Amelia, what you said about voices mattering, the board was watching. They called an emergency meeting. We're tripling the fellowship budget. And..." She paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm proposing we rename the entire foundation. The Betty Washington Foundation for Music Education. It's time we honored the right people." The flight home felt different from the flight out. Amelia was the same person, but the world's perception of her had shifted. Flight attendants recognized her passengers, asked for photos, and there was talk of an invitation to perform at the White House. "How do I stay myself through all this?" she asked Dr. Chun as they flew over the Atlantic. "By remembering why you started," he said. "You didn't begin playing for fame or medals. You played because music lived in you and demanded to be expressed. That hasn't changed. But everything else has." "No," Dr. Chun said firmly. "The noise around you has changed. But you're still Amelia Washington, 13 years old, who loves music and wants to share it. Hold on to that and you'll be fine." New York appeared below them, the city that had been both cruel and kind, that had taken everything and given everything back. Somewhere down there, Maya was practicing. Keisha was discovering new harmonies. Jerome was preparing for Tanglewood. Victoria Sterling was learning to teach children who challenged everything she thought she knew. And somewhere, in whatever way spirits lived on Grandma Betty, was smiling, knowing that her music hadn't died with her, but had multiplied, spreading through the hands and hearts of a new generation. The plane descended toward JFK Airport, toward home, toward the future that was no longer uncertain, but full of possibility. Amelia Washington, the homeless girl who'd played for food, was returning as the youngest gold medalist in Tchaikovsky competition history. But more importantly, she was returning as herself a teacher, a student, a composer, a girl who believed music could change the world because she'd already seen it happen. As they touched down, Amelia pulled out manuscript paper and began writing. Not a performance piece, not a competition entry, but something simple, a duet for Maya to play with Keisha, something that would make them both feel capable and connected. Because in the end, that's what music was for. Not for medals or fame or vindication, but for connection between past and present, between teacher and student, between one human heart and another. The plane rolled to a stop, and Amelia tucked the manuscript into her bag. There would be interviews, concerts, recording sessions, and endless opportunities ahead. But first, there was Saturday's teaching session, and young musicians waiting to discover their own voices. That was the real victory, she thought, as she prepared to face whatever came next. Not the medal in her carry-on bag, but the music that would continue long after she was gone, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart, generation to generation, an inheritance that no poverty, prejudice, or circumstance could ever silence.